requests. The 4, Megan will follow those up with the relevant teams, including Healthy Waters. I have already said to Martin that I'm keen to, whenever we find a spare moment, to go up meet with them and yourself, if that's okay. I know we've talked about it before, and maybe get Healthy Waters along as well. So those are very specific requests there, but a broader discussion would probably be good outside the city centre, and actually where the awa is would be a good idea. So we'll look to put that in my diary and your diary, Councillor, and see if Healthy Waters can join us. Yeah.
Thank you very, very much. I'll be very happy to join you.
Cool, thank you. And probably the Rodney Local Board, of course, as well. Right. Member Ashby, nearly said Councillor Ashby, sorry about that. If you just want to bring your mic forward, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for the presentation. Just noting that you have noted support and guidance from Ngāti Manahiri, and you mentioned a catchment plan. So the question was just simply, have you spoken with them around iwi have to, or can opt to create these mana o te wai statements which can inform a catchment plan? So it just seems like there's a natural alignment or synergy there. So it's just a question if you've had that conversation with them.
Yes, we have met with Ngāti Manahiri on a number of occasions, and we have a policy of forwarding anything that we are thinking about to them for first consideration. To date, they have said to us that progress is very slow in this area, but that they will share with us what comes through as it comes through, and we regard them as a very critical partner within the catchment areas.
Thank you. Any other questions? Right. Councillor Sayers, would you like to move this? And Councillor Fletcher would like to second. Thank you both for attending, and we've heard you loud and clear, and there's a very tangible things that we need to look into. So thank you very much for all the work and the team that you work with, the volunteers as well. So we appreciate it. All those in favour? Aye. Any opposed?
Aye.
I think that was everyone in favour, and it was just a late in favour, just to clarify. Right, we have next up public input. We have Auckland Rugby League. We've got Rebecca Russell and Dwayne Mann. Just want to introduce yourselves when you come up to the mic, and the button on the right is the microphone. Kia ora, welcome. And I think you've been told the drill. It's about a 5-minute presentation, and there'll be some questions after that, hopefully. Thank you very much. I just want to click your microphone. It's just the button on the right.
Sorry.
Cool. Kia ora, thanks.
All sorted. I am Rebecca Russell. I'm the CEO of Auckland Rugby League. With me today I've got Dwayne Mann, who probably most of you recognise, a bit of a rock star in the rugby league space. Dwayne is our General Manager of Clubs and Partnerships. We're here today to talk about our strategy. Rugby league is growing. ARL was formed in 1909. Next year we will be celebrating 115 years of rugby league in Auckland. We've defined our game plan out to 2030, and it is all about growth. We believe we can become the greatest league region in the world, and we believe this because we have such a rich history and such a legacy that this game holds, not just within Auckland, but also within New Zealand. And we are leveraging this to become much more accessible and much more relevant to many more people. Our strategy is anchored by 4 strategic pillars. The first one is all about player participation, creating new forms of the game, widening our market, and making sure that we retain that real love and passion of rugby league. We're focusing on our clubs. A thriving club plays a significant role in our community. We're improving their capacity and also their capability. We're also looking at our commercial value. We think we are sitting on a significant asset in the game of rugby league, and we are improving the brand perception, as well as looking at how we can really change the brand image of not just rugby league, but Auckland Rugby League. And leading facilities. This is a really big area, as you can appreciate. We have an ambition to have world-class facilities. We see no reason why we can't have centres of excellence across Auckland that are multi-sport, that can really deliver everything that we need in a modern game today. ARL is about great communities, great teamwork and great humans. We know that being part of our game means being part of a very special community. We know the value of coaches who can help guide our rangatahi, our supporters who are the lifeblood of our clubs, and our volunteers who are selfless and put the community first. We believe that rugby league grows great humans. And our reach is significant because Aucklanders love league. They might not all want to play league, but they certainly want to watch it. And this is based on a lot of research that we've done recently. Hundreds of thousands of Aucklanders see league as their top passion. Our focus is on engaging with these people and bringing them closer to our game and our clubs. Our footprint is vast. We reach as far north as Rodney and as far south as Tuakau. It makes us one of the most widespread RSOs in Auckland. With population growth, our goal is to grow in line with the spread of our community and ensure that rugby league is accessible for all. And we're growing. We're on our target to hit 10,500 players this year, which is 15% up on last year. More than half of our clubs have more than 600 members. 81% of our players are Māori Pacifica, and we have deep reach and influence into this community. We see this as a huge community. We recently launched the ARL Aunties, and really looking at how we can positively reinforce sideline behaviour and the game of rugby league. Our clubs serve as hubs for the community, not only with the game, but for social connection, services, events, and to support initiatives that can help improve outcomes for our community. But we need your help. Our facilities need focus. 7 of our clubs need immediate focus because they've got issues relating to flood damage, repairs, and some of our clubs, like East Coast Bays, were demolished maybe around 5 years ago. Pakuranga, who is impacted by the Eastern Busway project. 17 of our clubs have short-term needs. Fields in South Auckland are poorly maintained, which means with extreme weather events, we've struggled to run our competition fully. And that creates a lot of frustration within our community, and we lose some credibility. And we also lose that opportunity to connect with our communities. We need to modernise our facilities to make way for our girls and women who are growing at an incredible rate and provide them with appropriate areas to shower and change. We really appreciate all the work that Council does with us currently. We work really hard together, and often we are very successful in delivering the game each weekend because we kind of put it all together as one. What we would like is to know how we can work together to really grow greatness and to grow our game.
Kia ora. Thank you both for that very succinct presentation. And as we do definitely have empathy with the state of our infrastructure and fields at the moment, with it being saturated for about 18 months now, and the severe damage to about 100 of our parks and the issues that you're facing even before the flood. So it will be good I'll be ensuring that our team and Dave Stewart and the wider Sport and Rec team are aware of this. I'm sure they are, and how we can work with you closer. And on league in general, it is growing, huge sport across Tamaki Makaurau, but on the shore, not myself as a player, but I think my parents have had season tickets since I was about 10 years old to the Warriors through the really good times like at the moment, and even the slightly less good times. But I hope that's helping bring some more interest and kids through at the moment. I'm sure it will. And I've got a number of questions here, and I was wondering which wing would go first of the two of the biggest leagueies here. Councillor Watson first.
Yeah, thanks for your really good presentation and for the work Auckland Rugby League has been doing for many years now, and you're absolutely right. The league clubs are often, the hub of communities. It's not just a sport, and you see that in places like Northcote Tigers and the Raiders up on the Hibiscus Coast. My question, however, really goes to the challenge that club sport generally, but in particular rugby league, has faced in recent times, and I'm talking about the standing of the premier competition and the strength of teams. When you look at, certainly some areas have deteriorated. They've struggled with player numbers, and how that is reflected in those kind of feeder grades of the under-17s to the under-21s, which at one point were really strong competitions themselves, but have now kind of depleted in numbers, to be honest. So I'm just really looking for a bit more of an insight. I know the women's game has come on in leaps and bounds, and we have big growth in newer areas like perhaps Manurewa, and where they have massive big clubs. What about the challenges, though, in terms of just that strength and that player numbers in traditional areas where there has been a decline, where it's harder to get kids to come along and play league, and you've been caught up in a kind of similar situation as happened with Brisbane when the Broncos started up, where all the attention goes to the Warriors and the club competitions suffer as a consequence. So just really a bit more of an insight into the real challenges, other than the really good news that you've been told us with and associated with today.
Yeah, so we do have challenges. The North Shore, Hibiscus Coast, Glenfield, Northcote have been traditionally strong in previous years, and we're doing a few things there. We are creating different forms of the game, so we've got Kiwi Tag, and we're introducing a new product called League Tag. We're also bringing back our open age restricted grades, which have fallen off. So we've kicked that off this season. We've seen a lot of interest, so by doing that we're able to open up our game to a wider demographic. The challenges that we have within particularly the teenage years relate to, firstly, we get NRL clubs love coming to Auckland and taking our players, and they take them way too early, and we are working on how do we retain our players here, keep them in a strong competition. We're setting up an ARL academy in order to do that, to develop our players and retain them. We're working with the Warriors on development, and we're working with other NRL clubs on getting coaches developed in the right way, referees developed in the right way, all of the support services that go around the team. If they're not strong, the team won't be strong and people won't want to play. So we are looking at that full ecosystem. We do have a challenge with high schools. Often it's dictated to by the principal as to what sport they offer, and often rugby league. When I talk about the perception of rugby league, that's really what I'm talking about. How do we change that perception and really show all the positive things about league, that it's not just big hit-ups, and that there's so much more richness to that. So that strategy goes a lot deeper. We've really kind of thought about all of those aspects.
Thanks, Councillor. And yes, the game has changed a lot since those perceptions were around. Councillor Henderson.
Thank you, Chair. And before I begin, I have to say go the mighty Te Arotu Roosters, of course. Hoping for a good season next year. Look, I've got two questions. First and foremost, how are we looking to up the governance space for individual clubs? Because obviously that's kind of a good starting point to try and get some of the stuff that you're planning to do forward. So how are we working with clubs and governance?
Yeah, that's such a great question, and that's exactly what we are doing. So we understand you might join a club and you might end up being a chair of a committee because you started coaching your kids' team 5 years ago. So you don't necessarily come to the table with all of the skills and capability you need. So we are first of all working on our own constitution and our own governance, and that will flow down into clubs and setting that a new standard, as well as working with them. A big part of what Dwayne does is working with the clubs, defining their strategy, their business plan, their funding plan, putting all of that rigour in to help the clubs so that they don't need to sit there on their own and try and work it out. We're also developing a shared service model, so ARL will provide financial accounting, monthly accounting, we'll do their audits, we will provide procurement opportunities, which clubs can tap into. So we're really looking at how do we take that burden away from the clubs, let them do what they do best, which is, deliver the game and work within our community, so that we can really get it very, very strong.
That's fantastic. Just one more, if I may, Chair. Can you tell us more about the Centres of Excellence that you mentioned and what that might kind of look like?
It's a long-term dream. I guess when we look at what has made clubs in Australia really successful, it has been that significant investment in facilities. Is one aspect of it. I think what we see is multi-sport complexes that we might have 4 of them across Auckland, which we can kind of bring rugby league into and deliver the game there. So, but with all the facilities that we need, the right changing rooms for for women as well as men, the wrestling mats and all of the things that you need to really develop and grow talent.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. We have 5 more questioners, so I'm going to cut that off there and just stick with the 5 we have.
Everyone loves league. I told you.
Good interest. Might get some sign-ups here. Member Henare.
Kia ora, Rebecca, Dwayne. Given the run that the Warriors have had this year, I hear there's talk about another team from Auckland, or from New Zealand, but it would have to be Auckland. How does that impact on where you are going as Auckland Rugby League? I mean, what's the synergy between what we see week in, week out, and your organisation?
We are really clear about what we do as a community grassroots sport. We are all about participation, so ours is very much around volume. How do we bring as many players as we can to our game? And then from there, it is about development. We want to make superstars, and we don't mind where those superstars want to end up. We will help support them all the way through. What we don't do is recruitment, and what we don't do is elite pathways. So at that point, if you are, really excelling, we would expect that you will soon get noticed by an NRL club, whether that's the Warriors or someone else. And I think our role is to make that transition. We need to wrap that player up really well, because I don't think we have in the past necessarily. They need to have a driver's license, they need to know how to cook, they need to have career prospects outside of the game of league. That's what I see our role as. If that answers your question?
Yeah, given that the majority are Pacific Māori backgrounds, well, I won't answer that question. I'll ask you this question. If you know what you want from Auckland Council, is there a documented plan that says, "Dear Council, can we have the following"? And I mean, I'm speaking in my Otara language now.
Yeah.
But you know what I mean? I mean, is there a plan that somebody can read and say, okay, this is their plan, this is what they want, step by step, in terms of fields, in terms of facilities, blah, blah, blah?
Yes, we have been developing that over the last sort of 12, 18 months, and we are getting close to probably finalising that to be able to really articulate that clearly.
And just in response to Councillor Henderson, go the Scorpions.
Kia ora. Councillor Darby.
Kia ora, Rebecca and Dwayne. Thanks for your presentation. Look, probably your key question I'm hearing today is support on facilities. So in that area, as you'll appreciate, it's really a financial challenge to support individual codes in their own individual club facilities with the individual ground, so Rebecca or Dwayne, do you want to just expand on the league's view on integrated facilities, the discussions you've had with other codes, e.g. cricket, that complement you in opposite seasons, probably a little bit more difficult with rugby or hockey, on the league's view of integrated facilities, maybe with a squash facility integrated with it, and how that can actually help grow a club and cross membership between, you know, season codes and that sort of thing. The discussions you've had with, say, Auckland Cricket Association and other codes that are probably thinking the same. Maybe you could just cover that territory, yeah.
Tēnā koe, tēnā koutou. Auckland Rugby League has a long, as an RSO, a relationship with multiple sport codes, regional sports organisations, and through that collaboration over many years have had a mindset of sharing and using things like collective impact. The question around our facilities is they are community hubs. The truism that our plan is, it's not just sport, X's and O's, that will drive greatness and help people to be great. What happens in the rugby league community clubs, outside of a training day and a weekend of game, is vast and very varied across our 30 clubs. They have strong relationships with marae, strong relationships with churches, there are social enterprises, there's entrepreneurship, there's community champions driving rugby league clubs, be it volunteers or in a paid position with another organisation. But it's those community champions and the relationships that they hold within their community that is the activity that happens within a club. So that ties into our relationship with how we would work with other regional sports organisations and clubs over the shared use of facilities on and off the field.
So I'm just trying to get a sense. These discussions with the other codes are happening. There's a willingness, there's a drive to integrate, get more efficient use, not just out of the fields, but actually about the physical buildings that's happening. That's an active and focused issue for you guys.
So, and we work a lot with Active on helping to coordinate some of those discussions, because from our side of things, we don't know what we don't know. So, but Active have that very broad view. You'll see clubs like the Glenfield Greyhounds who have very successfully become much more strongly multi-sport than maybe other clubs. So it is dependent on the location. It's dependent on the willingness of the committee of that club to engage. So we are seeing that. Our ambition is for multi-sport to be, we just see that as the future, because there's really no other. We know that we can't sort of stand on our own, and because of all of the constraints that there are. So we're kind of there's kind of two paces to it.
Thank you. And yeah, and the Glenfield Greyhounds have done that despite our significant upgrade there taking quite a while of the fields and everything. They've still grown and broadened their scope within the community. It's pretty awesome. Councillor Filipaina.
Tēnā koe he mana, thank you so much. Kia ora ana korua, Rebecca and Dwayne. Firstly, Rebecca, congratulations on your role at Auckland. I know that your roles at Datacom in Air New Zealand was the catalyst, at least, for that strategic approach with Auckland Rugby League, so I congratulate you. For those that don't know Dwayne, he ended up playing a few seasons in England. He then came back to Auckland, ended up captaining the New Zealand side, played in 24 consecutive tests for the Kiwis, and also played in, I think it was the 86 World Cup Series. So, Dwayne, I mihi to you with your football career and congratulate you being the GM. Now, my question, Chair, I just wanted to ask both of you, are there any facilities on council parks that are governed or governed, for want of a better term, by the local board that are not, from your perspective, up to standard? Are there any parks that club rooms? So that's the first question through you, Chair.
Yeah, a large number of our club rooms are not owned, they're on council-owned grounds. Our aim is to work with local board and attend deputation meetings and advocate alongside our clubs. Manukau is an example of the significant flooding and the impacts aside from the flooding that is happening around Manukau. Richmond Rovers suffered severe flooding, as Rebecca mentioned in the opening comment with Pakuranga and the busway through. So yeah, we have a number of clubs on our facilities plan, and our aim is also to be front forward in a facilities plan for this. But yes, Councillor Philippine, the clubs are on needing collective assistance on those issues.
Just got two more. Sorry, Chair. The second one is, I think it might be aimed at you, Rebecca. And this second question is, how much, what can you as Auckland Rugby League do to link more of the games and more of our communities out south, for example, in Franklin? I mean, how would you link some of the work and assistance that those clubs may have? Because I know that there's been some struggles with some of the clubs out in Franklin. So I'll be interested to find out. And I don't want to then mix our conversation with the Stingrays. I think this is an Auckland Rugby League question. So can I just sort of ask how that can happen?
So South Auckland is very, very key, not just today, but for the future. We've developed a thriving club model, which we've called Puawai, and that is all about developing strength in the roots of our clubs and our game in order for the game and our clubs and community to flourish. So it's a very structured program which brings a lot more sort of capability to the clubs, as I mentioned before. I think we need to do a lot more in schools out south. I think there's massive opportunity. I think potentially the structure of the game in Auckland has been a little bit maybe muddled with the structure of the zones that exist. My philosophy is that we should all be working together and we should all be collaborating to do the right thing. So that is something that we will definitely see more of in South Auckland. I struggle to understand why a club like Papakura or Pukekohe are not stronger than what they are. Those clubs will get specific focus to better understand how we can really target participation and our communities in those areas.
Chair, the question is of you, this last one, and that is, what is going to come back to your committee, you and Angela's committee, around some of the facilities that we have on our local board parks? And I know that local boards are so crucial in this. And the reason I say that is because Manukau, that's the example that Dwayne gave, Manukau thought they were insured, that Auckland Council had the insurance, but as a result they found out that they hadn't for one reason or another, and now they've got no money at all to end up fixing the damage that was caused by the flood. It'll be good for a piece of work to come back with all our facilities. So the question is, will there be something coming back to us, Chair?
Kia ora, Councillor. I probably can't comment on off the top of my head, the form or kind of report or something that would come back on that. But there are a myriad of issues that Auckland Rugby League are facing, but I think a lot of our clubs are facing. At the Sports New Zealand conference last week, a number of clubs and organisations were talking about things like insurance, things like being underinsured, not having the access to funding and a lot of issues that we're facing. So I think there's a broader issue for clubs and groups generally, but I think on many of the issues you've brought up, I think it's keen for yourself. Councillor Henderson's messaged me and said he's keen. Myself, whoever, if there's a small group of us, we can't obviously move that today, but a small group of us that might want to meet with staff and then maybe get you around the table just to go through. There might be some really easy wins, the type of maintenance that you're expecting that you're not getting, different relationships, and then look longer at like the sports investment fund in different ways that you may or may not be tapping into or missing out on, and how we can ensure that we've got a big long list of funding investments going into parks and centres later on this agenda. Whether we are focused on rugby league enough may or may not be, and that needs to be addressed. So I think I couldn't comment on exactly what that form would look like, but it's definitely on the radar now, and we'll ensure that a group of us, including yourself if you'd like to, Councillor, can sit down and really thrash out that in a more hard to do in a 5 or 10 minute situation around this table. But I think you bring up a lot of good points, and it sounds like you're really willing to work with, not just asking for council to do everything or anything like that. So that's really helpful.
Thank you, Chair. And contrary to what Councillor Baker said, Dwayne didn't run over me or through me, contrary to what he said. So, but look, thank you, Chair. And Scorpions, I just want to mention the Scorpions at this stage because, and the reason I want to acknowledge the governing body members in 2012 that ended up getting 4.2 million, and that club now is a beacon in Otara. I can tell you that now, and that is where you have multiple sports. So I just wanted to acknowledge the governing body in 2012. They got that money. Christine's there, Mike, Sharon. So I just wanted to do that. I think, yeah. So look, I just wanted to thank you. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Councillor. Thank you very much. Right, Deputy Chair, Councillor Dalton, you have a question.
Kia ora, Chair. Tēnā kouroa. Rebecca and Dwayne, thank you for your presentation. Mine was on a similar vein, and it was around the sports fields themselves. So you mentioned that South Auckland in particular is having challenges. So you've seen a different level of service in South Auckland in terms of fields, and is that meaning that there is less playing time available for our kids in the south? Or all players in the south?
Yeah, correct. So I think we're challenged with the hours that we get, but also the what I would say is probably just a lack of maintenance over time. We have very few, on the shore we have a few options around, or even central, some hybrid field surfaces, which of course withstand the extreme weather a lot better. Out south I can't even think of one where we have a different surface. So when we have those weather events, it is a little bit like Tetris on a Friday afternoon, trying to put it all together, and the team work very hard. Our goal is to make sure all of our grades, all of our kids can play. And it is incredibly challenging. And even though they can play, they are wallowing in water and mud, and it's not a great experience. So that is particularly in South Auckland.
Thank you for that. And isn't that such a shame that again we perpetuate this inequity, and it's always in the south, our poor kids. So I would really like to be part of the conversations too. I think the chair has recommended a way forward informally. We'll do something informal about it, but thank you for bringing that to our attention.
Yeah, if I could just say too, it's certainly the south and also the west, but as Rebecca mentioned at the beginning, our geographical spread from Rodney to Franklin, it's difficult and complex and complicated for us to see the service and the investment, and to know where the leverage points are to generate change in a timely and effective manner. So the support and the ask is there for that. We know from our surveys and our data, and also tying into the sports sector data, our point of difference is our rugby league people are transient, and they will work and move and play across Greater Auckland, across Tamaki Makaurau, not just because of its generational ties, but because of just current day choice and other factors. So that's a partner as well. The point too around the South Auckland and our clubs are shared with softball, that bit about other sports codes, softball, wakaama, and so the facilities are shared extensively with other regional sports codes.
Kia ora, thank you. And Councillor Dalton and I, as the Deputy Chair of the committee, will be asking for as much of the data as we can, the data for the use to see, because obviously that data is there on the hours of use that will show that discrepancy between South and West, and we do hear the same stories forever, and just because other areas may have had sand carpets, it means we need to pick up the pace in other areas if there's not, because during the drought there was people breaking their ankles on the massive holes in the ground, and then we get the opposite issue in the wet if those fields aren't to a standard to start with. So we will make sure that that is put into the long-term plan around that focus. So thank you. Well, it was one, now it's, I will allow Councillor Bartley to be added to the list, but that is it. Councillor Leone.
Kia ora. Thank you very much for coming in and having a kōrero with us today. Mine's just more about Amity and the relationship that you've got with them, with the new, with obviously the grounds being impacted. So I just wanted to ask, are they actually supporting you with retaining your members and access to the fields? Eastern Busway.
That there is attempt by our chair of Pakuranga in trying to work through, but very difficult to understand who are the key people to talk to, and then what's the decision making or the information flow for those involved in that. So there is.
I just wanted to say, so you've presented already to the Howick Local Board?
Not to the Howick Local Board, no.
Okay.
And that's, clearly, that's a good point, Councillor Leone. I think it's clear that we need to figure out who in the alliance there we can be working with, because I know with the Northern Corridor, we got quite a good relationship out of that when sports fields were changed around, and Councillor Watson was heavily involved in that. But if that's not happened through this relationship on Eastern Busway, we need to figure out why not and how we can figure that out. So lots to take along. Councillor Bartley.
Thank you, Chair. Kia ora, Rebecca. Kia ora, Dwayne. I don't have a question. I just had a comment. I just wanted to also offer, if there is going to be an unofficial working group, I'd like to be part of that to support Auckland Rugby League. I'm so happy to see you guys here at this table, because you've got other sporting codes that are like real strategic. They're always in our faces. And it's good to see League step into this realm and connect with the governing body of Auckland, because you're quite right. There are so many issues with the sports fields. They sit in local board territory, but there's also the part for us to play as a region, because we invest in areas in sports. We invest because we want to see more active participation of our Māori Pasifika communities that are less active, and you have them right there. I mean, I just even look at MMT and how we can maximise and capitalise on our communities that are already active through League. So very keen to see. The issues that I see are around maintenance, just the basic maintenance of our sports fields where they have their clubs, and then also regionally, strategically, how we get you guys in the pipeline for that investment fund, which has been an ongoing issue, because we seem to keep funding clubs that are well resourced with these facilities and not our clubs like this. So I'm very keen to see what I can do to assist in your unofficial working group. Thank you.
Thank you.
Kia ora, thank you very much. And I hope you're glad you came here today. I feel like a successful presentation and a good response, and it sounds by the numbers that it may be a very large working group, but lots of issues to think about. And as Councillor Bartley said, look, the teams out there, council side, are doing their best to prioritise, but I think it is important also to be that squeaky wheel, encourage clubs to report at even small issues, so we can get ahead of that, talk to local boards. I know that takes a lot of time, but it does help get a a picture of where we need to prioritise if that's being missed as well. There has been a bit of a jockeying, Councillor Watts.
I better defer to the Mangere East Hawks on this one, Councillor. Rugby league royalty can't compete with that.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Okay. Councillor Philippine would like to move, and Councillor Watson had said he'd like to move, but he can second this one. And we will let you go for your day, but we'll be definitely in contact. I think we've got all your details, and I'm sure the relevant staff have heard the presentation as well. So thank you both very much for coming along and all the work you do in our communities. So all those in favour? Any opposed? Thank you. Right, and now we have Kate Woodhouse, the Deputy Chair of the Auckland Conservation Board, and I think Narissa Henry is joining. Cool. Kia ora, thank you both for being here, and I understand Nicola McDonald couldn't make it today.
Kia ora koutou, ko Kate Waterhouse tōku ingoa. I'm the Deputy Chair of the Auckland Conservation Board, and giving an apology for Nicola. She received a call this morning that more caulerpa, the invasive caulerpa seaweed that you're going to hear about later, has been found near Kaua, so she is out on the water while the water is calm. Just trying to get a sense of how bad that is. I'm joined by my colleague, Narissa Henry, who's familiar to a number of you. And in the back there is our erstwhile board support officer, John Galilee. So if there are any actions that arise from our conversation now, John will be the follow-up point for officers. So we don't have a presentation today. We're here to get in your face, to use Councillor Bartley's phrase. We last presented to you during the annual budget when we were very alarmed at the reduction, the unintentional reduction in environmental spend that had been generated by those initial proposals, and we thank Council for the changes that occurred that reinforce some of that spending, especially at the local level. We are a statutory body appointed by the Minister of Conservation, so we are independent of DOC, and our role is to advocate for conservation in the region, but we also are responsible for statutory matters like land transfers, concessions of any sort of magnitude. We have 3 seats, one each for the Tāmaki Rōpū, the settlement Rōpū, and we have other mana whenua members and members of the public with a broad range of skills and backgrounds that relate to conservation. The conservation management strategy for Auckland guides the department's and the public's activities on public conservation land. So in Auckland, that is a bunch of reserves scattered all over the isthmus, plus most of the islands, including Aotea and Hautaru and the Mokahino. I'm really here to ensure that we have formally introduced ourselves to Council and to ensure that you have awareness of our role and our intention to advocate for biodiversity in Auckland, and particularly today to advocate to you as a regional authority to give effect to the RMA and the treaty and use the powers available to you to address the biodiversity crisis in instruments such as the long-term plan and the coastal plan. But I'm going to add to that after the presentation of the Matakaona, our catchment group, catchment management plans. So, you know, if protecting biodiversity was a sport, we would get more attention, absolutely. And it is a sport. Hundreds of thousands of Aucklanders this weekend will get out there and do things like pull weeds, plant trees, get out into the bush, get out onto the water. because they are doing work like that Matakana group that you saw and heard from today. There are, I believe, according to even Council's own numbers, more than 2,000 different projects and groups doing that work every weekend and week in Auckland. So you are, as the regional authority, whether you know this or not, you are the Auckland Rugby League of biodiversity in this region, whether it's on the ground, on the land, in freshwater, or in the coastal zone. That's your role. And we are quite concerned that post-amalgamation focus on, in particular, the marine and the freshwater spheres and Council's legislative obligations to maintain Indigenous biodiversity in the region have not been met. And in fact, the focus on those is well out of whack with other regional councils, and it has dramatically reduced since, for example, Councillor Lee was in Auckland Regional Council back in the days prior to the Super City. Now, obviously, council's had other priorities, but you have some opportunities in front of you to address some of these legacy issues and also to address the biodiversity crisis that is occurring right now. I want to particularly today focus on the marine space. You're going to hear a lot about one of the issues later from environmental services around marine biosecurity. But I'm just checking my notes here. Sorry, I had to rejig after the whole rugby league situation, you know, and change my metaphor. You know, in relation to freshwater, I just really want to talk about that Matakana group as one group that is asking for catchment management plans. They're a key tool in freshwater ecosystem management. Freshwater ecosystems, as we've seen this year, are part of the climate response infrastructure. If they're intact and they're in good condition, they slow down water and they stop erosion and they stop flooding. And council is obliged to pay attention to that, not just for biodiversity reasons. So tautoko to them. Next week, you may be aware that the Hauraki Golf Forum is releasing its 3-yearly State of Our Golf report. That report has for 23 years shown consistent and quite dramatic degradation in the quality of marine ecosystems and in the status of marine species in the Hauraki Golf area. So if you draw a little map, and you know, it would be a good thing for you to be provided with this, which extends the coastal zone, the 12-mile coastal zone, out from the Auckland region, for which you are responsible as a regional authority, you're going to cover a significant chunk of that marine park. That's in scope of your powers under the RMA, and the coastal plan is how you decide what you are going to permit to occur there. And what we are asking you to do is to ask for advice on what is possible for you to do to better protect marine biodiversity in particular, but also freshwater and terrestrial biodiversity as this climate warms. Okay, because it makes everything worse. Everything. So in the marine space, you know, you're aware of the biosecurity risks that are going to keep coming. So as the ocean warms, more biosecurity risks will occur because more species will find northern New Zealand attractive. And that's why we have caulerpa, it's why we have marine fanworm, it's why we have sea squirts. I don't know about clams, I think they like warm water too, but you'll hear about that later. So I think the other thing I draw your attention to is we don't know how good we have it in this marine space. The Hauraki Gulf it's a globally significant marine ecosystem. It's amazing, even in its degraded state. The concentrations of seabirds are globally significant. It's a global seabird hotspot. It's a marine mammal hotspot. And what we've seen with the Northern Regional Council and the Waikato Regional Council is that in their coastal plans, they have now included biodiversity protection measures which cover the 12-mile coastal zone, and we are asking that you do that too. So what it means is that you can do things like the Bay of Plenty Regional Council has done, which is to prohibit fishing around the Motiti Islands. And they were taken to the High Court by the iwi there, the hapu there, sorry, to uphold Council's responsibilities under the RMA to protect Indigenous biodiversity and to stop fishing around those islands because they were being stripped. Now that's one example of a council taking advantage of its powers under legislation, but there are others. So I'm really urging you to seek advice on this, what is possible, and I'm urging you to seek advice on the risks in particular. So you're going to hear all about the biosecurity risks later today, or some of the current ones. There are others like the Niagara, which is the wreck that's leaking oil and could generate a huge oil spill bigger than the Rena all over our east coast beaches. That is inside the 12-mile coastal zone. I urge you to take a field trip. So, after you go and see the grounds in the north, keep going and go to Lee, and then get on a boat and go out to the Mokahino, and drive on through a couple of workups where, whales come up and push fish to the surface, and the kingfish are there and the dolphins are there, and you've got, 7 or 8 varieties of seabirds feeding on that. That is what should be happening in the waters just off Milford, but it's not. And you guys have got the power to ensure that some of the pressures in that marine ecosystem can be reduced. You can, for example, limit fishing. You can limit other activities. It's just a question of political will. So I really urge you to seek advice on that, on your role, especially in the marine space. Do come along on the 11th of August to the yacht squadron and just see how bad it really is out there under the sea. And that's before Kalupa arrived. And I really urge you to consider how you address this legacy deficit in resourcing and in plans and in budgets to maintain Indigenous biodiversity in this region as you develop the next LTP and the coastal plan. Kia ora.
Kia ora, thank you very much, and to both of you for coming and for meeting with myself and Nicola a few weeks ago, months ago.
Yes, I'm sorry I couldn't make that. I had a funeral, but we will write to you and
Yes.
put these thoughts in writing, but I think it's really to officers now.
We gave you double the time because we felt like we need to improve and increase the partnership relationship of the board, which I think probably has been lacking in previous terms. So we're going to work on that. Councillor Dalton and I are keen to continue to meet and work with you on shared issues, I guess, challenges, but also what opportunities there are to work together, because clearly it's better using the same resource together.
Yeah.
I mean, the two lots of resources together and advocating in one way and back to us as well. So you've given us a lot of food for thought as well. Councillor Fletcher has a question first.
Oh, thank you. I've got a few questions, actually, if I may, Morena. And thank you for your passionate advocacy in terms of the role we must all play in terms of biodiversity. My interest is in how we can bring all the strands of that advocacy, whether it's through central government, whether it's through local government, whether it's through the Hauraki Gulf Forum, whether it's through volunteers, that we all must play a part here. It's not just pointing the finger at one. I was actually at and before I go into my specific question, I do want to acknowledge Alex Rogers as the Executive Officer for the Hauraki Gulf Forum. It was from the last forum that was held in Maraitai that the issues have really begun to advance, and why I think we are going to have a lot of powerful presentations today, and why I think all elected members and members of the IMSB really have to bring to everyone's attention the role that we've got in terms of dealing with Kalupa, because the damage in our coastal marine environment is just going to be extraordinary. But what I want to know from the Conservation Board, because we've got some wonderful people like the Phil McDonalds, the Rachel Kelleher's, the Liz Brooks, we've got powerful staff, and these people have the knowledge to bring to us some of our responsibilities. So we have to play our part in the LTP. But what part are you playing in terms of the practical advocacy for the volunteer groups that are doing the work unpaid? I was at a trust meeting last night where it really sunk home to me, with Fuller's withdrawing their services out to the Gulf Islands, in a way that we are not going to be able to have that work program that is so utterly necessary. You know, what are we seeing by way of the advocacy there for some of those sort of specific practical details that enable us to be able to see that continuing work? There was another example on an issue that was for an area that just serves coffee and ice cream, which DOC had exempted from health and safety standards, given what has happened on White Island. There's this sort of suddenly renewed interest in health and safety, and this trust is going to have to spend $5,000 on getting a health and safety audit for something that had been exempted. Now, I don't want to do anything that is going to be stopping good health and safety measures, but sometimes our overreaction can place on volunteer organisations just incredible burdens. So I'm just curious to know how you're working with the volunteer sector, who are such an important part of bringing attention and solutions to the biodiversity issues that you're raising.
I think that was why we came to the annual budget hearing, because we saw that inadvertently council was defunding that sector through the various threads that it is supported by. That's the first thing I'd say. Second thing is regarding the motu, that is subject to a conservation management plan, which is a post-settlement instrument, and so issues like facilities on those motu would be covered by that, and that is currently with the department to sort through with the relevant hapu and iwi. But in terms of that general point about supporting the community and conservation, obviously it's a key objective of the board to do that, but that would be an entirely other meeting, and today we really wanted to focus on the marine domain and that opportunity with the coastal plan and the LTP to really address that legacy funding gap and the resourcing gap and what's under the water.
Thank you for that answer. And I guess one of the concerns I've had for quite a while is that the Department of Conservation has really struggled with insufficient funding and a very wide mandate. Is there a similar stream of advocacy that you are doing to central government to try and see this being addressed? Because it can't all just be the responsibility of the Auckland Council. I think central government have to play their role in this.
Yes. I think I can think of several examples where it's beneficial to have council at the table when those discussions occur. That's what I would say. Conservation is chronically underfunded in New Zealand and unfortunately in Auckland, because Auckland has, even though it has nationally significant biodiversity assets in those offshore islands, in Hauturu, Little Barrier, for example, Aotea, Mokahino, and the Hauraki Gulf Marine Park, the region is chronically underfunded. It's DOC's regional budget in Auckland is embarrassing. I think it was $7 million the last time I looked. And they are maintaining a massive amount of visitor infrastructure. They're caught up in the, if you think you've got underfunded capital budgets, you should take a look at DOC's. They've got a $300 million, retrospective business case for maintenance of DOC assets nationally with Treasury at the moment, and Treasury are arguing the toss over it. In terms of visitor access, you all know the benefits of access to nature for the well-being of communities, and you all know the benefits of blue and green infrastructure. I think collaborating with council around ways to increase public access to and engagement with the nature that we do have in the region has got to be worth it, because it will be a way that you can extract funding out of central government, but you're going to have to extract more because at the moment it's a deficit model. You are doing far more for conservation in the region than DOC is, and that's not their fault.
I think that's a really interesting insight, and I'm hoping that our mayor is listening, because while the public are very vocal about what they want in an environmental sense, they're probably unaware of that current deficit. And I hope that going into central government elections across political parties, there can be a much greater awareness of what this deficit means going into the future.
Kia ora, Councillor Thatcher. Very good point. I think it is a bit depressing that conservation doesn't seem to rate highly in election campaigns. It seems to be more about arguing over roads. But you know, DOC seems to has had some raises in income in the last few years, but not much. And whether that's going to continue is up to all of us to put the pressure on.
And look, you raised a really good point. So think of DOC funding in three buckets. There's that $300 million capital deficit, where it's just unbudgeted, unfunded, respective maintenance of most of the huts in the country and tracks and bridges. So that's one bucket. The second bucket is their current operational budget, which, as you know, just gets shaved and shaved and shaved. It's a soft target. And then the third one is the new bucket that came with COVID. There's not many things that were good that came with COVID, but one of them was Jobs for Nature. And what that was a way to fund a huge increase in the hectares under management, and at the same time provide employment, and I will say a significant amount of Māori employment in those big Jobs for Nature projects. And Auckland did do well there. The one that I'm on the steering committee for, Tū Mai Taonga on Aotea, is going to eradicate feral cats and rodents from Aotea. And there are others on the mainland. That is going to finish between 2024, 26, depending on the project, and it should not finish, because what it's doing is what you do. It's enabling capacity that's in the community and in hapu to do the work that needs to be done and that they want to do.
Yes,
yeah, they're the three buckets.
I remember through the lockdown, our staff doing phenomenal work in short amount of time on that Jobs for Nature program, and part of our feedback,
greatly appreciated, by the way, greatly appreciated.
To Minister Sage was because all the shovel-ready projects were mostly concrete focused, and there was such an opportunity for broader set of skills and outcomes being brought in, and it did get a minor amount of funding compared to those other things. But
there's a mystifying contrast between the concrete funding and the natural environment funding in central government. Who knows why?
We have a number of questions again, but I'll try and cut them off now. We've got 5. Mayor Brown first.
Thanks for an excellent presentation. I'm encouraged by quite a lot of what you're saying and frightened by the results. And I am part of a group that gets out there in the weekend, sea cleaners. And,
good on you.
But you asked us to get advice. Who from?
Probably the lady sitting to your right would be the best place to answer that.
Ian?
Megan. Through the chair, if you did want some particular advice, we can certainly provide that. The council across, certainly my division as well as others have a role, both regulatory role, but also working with the board and other organisations in this area. So whatever you might need to know, just let me know and we'll provide that.
Well, a lot of the things you suggested, about stopping fishing, are the present items. Boat cleaning is an issue here because we've somehow or other managed to get rid of our areas to clean boats. Hauraki local board convinced themselves it was a good idea not to clean boats there. I don't know quite what thinking there was going on there, if any. So I need some advice on what we can do. You've told us the direction, but I will get advice on what we can. The long-term plan, well, you've raised several times, is something which I'm hoping you'll make some sort of contribution to yourself. The 12-mile zone is another thing about which I don't know what we can and can't do there, but I'd like to look into that. You mentioned something at the yacht squad on 11th of August. What was that exactly?
It's the presentation of the State of our Golf Report. So it's a quick, short education with drinks and networking. So I recommend that one.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure because I'll
It's the same night as the soccer at Eden Park, though, so, tricky. Yeah.
Yeah,
It sounds like there's also perhaps a general knowledge kind of piece that might be missing for councillors around those obligations and what instruments you have available.
Yes.
Yeah, I think
Before you get into the tactics.
what strengths, what powers do we have,
Mayor, just on a number of those questions, I've already messaged my councillor support advisor, Rachel, to organise a meeting with Alex, who is online, for Councillor Dalton and I. Maybe you could come into that just on, because he's got a clear understanding of a lot of the things we can't do, could do now if we had money, or and then there's the advocacy points, and a lot of it is through the amazing work Alex and team are doing to support the Hauraki
But
Golf
just consider the same questions for fresh water. So, for example, what is the pipeline of catchment management plans that are in progress? The last time I went to council, there was one for the Hotio. There's clearly not one for that Matakana catchment. Auckland doesn't have that many really big catchments, so where are those catchment plans at? When Councillor Fletcher talks about drawing together the threads, the way that we do that is at place. There's been lots of work done through the Options Development Group that reported to DOC on the management of conservation in Aotearoa, New Zealand 2 years ago around the importance of conservation at place. Catchment management plans are a really important tool because they're spatial. You may find that there's some marine versions of that you can work with different hapu on in their rohi. I think it just needs a bit of creative thought. But don't just think about the marine. Please do think about freshwater, because our freshwater deficit is horrendous in the Auckland region. The biodiversity loss there has been dreadful, and the wetland loss as well.
Thanks very much for that. I think Blair Tuke's on to me about going to that thing at the squadron, so...
Oh, good on you. Yeah, well, I'll see you there.
Well, he's a good mate of mine. He gives me health hoofer.
He's keen on the whole marine biodiversity thing. He's pretty interested in what's under the water.
Yeah.
I didn't talk about the manta rays,
Champions
did I?
are really important to have. We've just been addressed by champion rugby league players, but here's a sailor who's a champion for the environment.
Yeah, well, you're the Auckland Environmental League, you lot. So, there you go.
Kia ora, thank you. Councillor Leone.
Kia ora. Kia ora korua. Great to hear this, and absolutely tautoko all of the points that you've raised today. Also being Ngāti Pawa.
Wow.
So we've done some great work actually, aside from Auckland Council and central government, we were able to put a rāhui in place. So, I just wanted to get some feedback from you first around, because I haven't heard you mention rāhui. We know that actually was actioned a lot faster than what Auckland Council and central government do. So have you looked at that in your recommendations going forward?
It's a really key tool, and you're quite right to highlight the speed with which central government has not moved on marine protection in the Auckland region. And so you've seen rāhui by Ngāti Pawa, but also by Ngāti Manahiri, by Ngāti Hei, by Ngāti Reho, Ngāti Waikaotea. These are necessary, and eventually, we get to the stage where they're codified. But I think for Auckland Council, really, the thing that you've got on the bench is this 12-mile coastal zone and what you can require there and what you can prohibit. And it's mystifying to me why, for example, we are allowing sand mining still in the coastal zone. And, those hearings are in progress right now, but that is an example of an activity that has ceased in coastal zones in other jurisdictions all over the world for reasons that are, due to the damage that it does. I mean, once you use that resource, it's gone and the ecosystem is stuffed.
Was the 12-mile zone mahi that's been done up north, so was that done by like an MOU with mana whenua there, or?
I don't actually know, but again, I think there'll be teams in the natural environment strategy area and Megan's team that will be able to help you out with what Northern Regional Council and Waikato have done. I can't imagine they can even move without, deep consultation up there, so I would expect so.
Ka pai, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Leone. Councillor Lee.
Thank you.
Ian.
I think we all appreciate the advice you're giving us. It's frank and honest, and it needs to be taken on board. The difficulty of our structure nowadays, and you compare us with other regional councils, we are in theory a regional council, but our weight of responsibilities makes us more a very large, massive city council. You would appreciate that this committee really is the equivalent of your board, given its responsibilities, but the wide range of public input that you've heard this morning demonstrates the very wide range of this particular committee and, of course, the council itself. Now, when it comes to marine space, you make a point that the council needs to lift its game, and I agree with that. However, the agency responsible for marine space and the Hauraki Gulf Marine Park is your parent agency, the Department of Conservation. And to be honest with you, it would be no secret to say there is widespread disappointment at the performance of the Department of Conservation when it comes to the marine space and the Hauraki Gulf Marine Park. Doc is very quick to sign off on marine farms, and a huge one has been approved near Waiheke. It's very quick to tick off marinas. But I am involved in a group, the Friends of the Hauraki Gulf, and we've been through the whole legal process set out in the Marine Parks Act, 1971, for a marine reserve application. We've done everything that's required, and DOC have been sitting on that application now for some 18 months and are not moving it. The Minister of Conservation, there's been 3 in that period, none of them have ever seen it because DOC is still sitting on it. So my question, okay, you've told us to lift our game, but my advice to the Conservation Board and the parent Department of Conservation is, and comes to the marine space and marine advocacy and doing something practical about marine protection. My question is, what are you guys doing?
You're quite right. So just to be clear, the Conservation Board is independent of DOC and we're appointed by the Minister, and we do advocate direct to the Minister. So we've done that just in the last couple of months on Kalupa and on the Niagara. We will definitely be doing it after this report comes out, and on most of the matters that we've talked about today. Completely agree with you, but it goes back to this conservation deficit that we have in Aotearoa, New Zealand. It's not good enough. And if you talk about concrete, I think that road over Mount Messenger going down to Taranaki is going to cost something like $350 million, which is about the size of the capital deficit that I was talking about in Treasury for the whole country, for all of DOC's infrastructure in terms of residual maintenance. There's just a mindset that they underfund conservation, and it is bizarre. It is a miracle that Jobs for Nature was actually funded in that environment. I don't know who got that up still, but they were a genius. But what it's proven is what can be achieved and how popular that is and how good it is for for the mana of the iwi involved, of the well-being of communities involved, and for the environments that are being invested in and protected. So I think with the Gulf, you know, you're completely right. The number of times I have sat in presentations from departmental staff, and I have to say we have to bring an MPI here because there's an issue there too, in terms of the legislation around protecting marine biodiversity, in the fishing sector in particular, but also in others. It's just not valued the way that it should be. And, you know, again, I'll draw your attention to that Options Development Group report that went into this in great detail and outlined what the deficit was, and that model of expecting DOC to deliver so much with so little has got to change.
Can I just say, it's not just about money, it's about culture, and either can do or no can do. And I think, to be fair, DOC is leaning towards the latter in recent years. There's not a can-do attitude compared to the Department of Conservation when it started out. That's my observation. Thank you.
Kia ora, thank you, Councillor Lee. Member Ashby.
Thank you for the presentation. Obviously, the issues you've talked about and biodiversity in general are highly important to mana whenua. Also just wanting to really support a lot of your comments today and agree that yeah, I think the council has a role. I also support Councillor Lee's comments around the broader system, but I do think council can play a broader role. With that being said, I also want to acknowledge the council staff who play a good game of whack-a-mole with different biosecurity threats that pop up. Not an easy job. My question is really in terms of just to focus on the marine environment and the Hauraki Gulf specifically, although I also care about other harbours and waterways, but the recent UN framework on biodiversity advocated for increase in protected areas. Different definitions of of what that is, but obviously marine reserves is one, and there's only a couple in the Hauraki Gulf. There's been talks of others over the years. So it's just really a question of has the Conservation Board looked at the current offering of that as one mechanism of upping the protected area, and if so, you know, what does that look like? Is it a percentage? I know that 30%'s been thrown around. Is that something to be collaborated on with all of the parties in the room, I imagine? The other thing, and I totally agree with you on the catchment plans, in terms of overfishing, sediment and climate change as a changing baseline. The importance of those catchment plans is going to increase. So I'm quite interested in those two mechanisms, because you can throw money at it and probably not move it too far, but some of the policy mechanisms, I imagine, are going to be what starts to shift it. The only other question I have is just to turn briefly to the terrestrial sort of environment. I'm really interested in, we have a whole bunch of wonderful volunteers who put their time into you know, weed and pest eradication, probably equivalent of billions a year in that, in terms of labour. And then at the same time we have these what I call retail weeds, where you pull out the jasmine, and then the neighbour goes down to the Bunnings and buys some more and plants it in the backyard. It reinfects the ECA or the conservation land, and on it goes, which is probably a definition of madness. So I'm also interested just to see if you guys have done any work in terms of some of the costs and in terms of money or labour, but also biodiversity burden for the conservation estate in terms of those retail weeds that might be reinfesting those lands from neighbouring properties. Thank you.
Just to take that last point first. So, one of the really excellent things that staff have worked on in the last decade or so has been the RPMP, which does cover what you're talking about, even on conservation land. So on the weed front, like whilst it feels overwhelming sometimes, there is stuff in place there. It's not in our worry space, other than it's a worry, like you say, you see it every day, right? On the marine protected area target, you know, clearly as a board we support that 30% target. In fact, you know, we'd probably go higher. We are on record in criticising the department's revised target, which turns up at like 18%, I think, of what Sea Change wanted, and that consultation happened 9 years ago, and we still don't have one. It's outrageous. When we challenge the department on that, and I have to bring MPI in here too because they tend to hunt as a pack on this stuff, and the answer I got was that they felt that they had to seek a compromise, and of course, who with, you'll ask, it's the fishing industry. So, you know, as a council, I'm seriously advocating for you to look at what the effect would be of declaring limits to fishing within the coastal zone in the Hauraki Gulf Marine Park. And if you did that, what would be left? I think you could have a huge effect. And you would have to work incredibly intelligently to do it with each hapu and each community. But, you know, no one wants to not be catching fish. No one wants califer all over the crayfish holes, which is what's happening on Aotea. No one wants sediment choking, you know, scallop beds. No one wants that. We all want different things for our next generation. And so I really encourage you to use that tool and think about how you can reduce the sediment loads and the pollutants going into those receiving environments, the Gulf, and to stopping damaging activities, whether it's through support for rahui, whether it's measures in the coastal plan within the coastal zone, or both. The tools are there, the tools are not the problem. It's taking the time to use them and to codify that into a coastal plan that actually the community will support, because, you know, coastal communities are gutted at what's going on.
Thank you, Kate. And yes, we're going to get some advice on that. Now, the last question from Councillor Turner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Very, very interesting and very challenging for me personally in some ways. You verbalised what my question was going to be before when you spoke about the people having to engage them and them paying. And it's easy to say no. It's easy to lock people out, but that's not a long-term fix. We have to have people buy in, we have to keep them engaged, and we have to have a morale in there that makes them want to participate. Because I just looked up here, I look at a map here, you know, we've got 1.5 million Aucklanders. We've plonked ourselves on an isthmus, which is where nature has plonked itself to in many ways. And we have to accommodate both. So I applaud everything you say, but making it work for all of us in a sustainable way is hard. You know, I live out on the Waitakere coast. I live on the edge of the Manukau Harbour. I've been there for a long time. Some of your explanations or descriptions of nature is not my observation, some are, but we can't disconnect people from this by just simply locking them out. That's my opinion. Maybe you have another one.
No, you're quite right. I mean, I'm thinking of Anne Salmon's words, Dame Anne Salmon's words here around people are part of the ecology. You know, that takes a long way to get your head around, but if you're mana whenua, it doesn't. And so we are playing catch up with an Indigenous worldview here in conservation, and we have to catch up really fast because, you know, notwithstanding your comments about observations, most of the indicators are in the toilet. They really are. And the difficulty is that in this social media age, you know, you can see a post about kakapo going back to Mangatautari, or, you know, spoonbills on the sandbanks of the Manukau, which is what I saw the other day, and you think, oh, sweet, everything's peachy. But you come along next Friday night and you'll see how not peachy it is. And the problem is we have 2 generations at least who are growing up not understanding what things should look like, not understanding that it is okay to swim in a river in Auckland, that it is okay to swim at your beach without having to check the swim safe. You know, that's intergenerational loss right there. And we have to start thinking about what bottom lines we're going to tolerate. And one of the things that's missing from the information that you receive as a committee, and I appreciate Councillor Lee's comments about the breadth of this committee being too broad to have planning, environment and leisure in the one committee, but leaving that aside, you don't have a dashboard to look at. You don't have indicators for freshwater, marine and terrestrial biodiversity to say what's happening. So you're flying blind, you're Auckland Rugby League for the environment, and you've got no data.
Thank you. We are going to have to leave it there, Councillor Turner. We have public forum for half an hour and we're at 2 hours now, and we have a huge agenda.
Go the public.
Great public input.
It's been fantastic and really, really important, but I think there's a number of issues we need to get advice on, and we are already doing some of this work and have already been in discussions with staff around marine, pests and biodiversity, and what we need to add into the long-term plan. There's a huge amount of work to do, and granted that we have been trying to increase with the water quality targeted rate, natural environment targeted rate and others, significant increase over the last few years, but we're not there yet at all, and it, as you say, does drag us back when government doesn't meet us even close, and unfortunately those budgets, those jobs for nature budgets disappearing is not going to be very good one either, but good food for thought for the Mayor as he's writing to parties on what Auckland needs as well through the election campaign. Councillor Fletcher has asked us to also, as part of your concerns and request the Mayor to write to the Minister of Conservation outlining the committee's concern about the department's lack of priority and resourcing, particularly OPEX for conservation work in Tamaki Makaurau, including the marine environment, which I think is very important. So Councillor Fletcher will move the overall acknowledgement of your public forum as well as the addition. And would Councillor Lee, did you want to second?
Councillor Lee?
Did you want to second?
In moving this, and I'm sure Councillor Lee will be happy to second, may I acknowledge your chair, and may I acknowledge also our former colleague Gail Ogilvie, and suggest it doesn't need to be documented that we have regular briefings from the Conservation Board, because I think it's really helpful in terms of progressing our own responsibilities and programme.
Yes, kia ora, Councillor Fletcher. When I met with the team, Nicola and Gail and others, my hope is that this would be a start of a new relationship where we can work together more often and probably in a less formal way too, so we can have that more meaty conversation we want to have, and then, you know, potentially figure out for whatever the government looks like after October, that we have some clear goals or challenges, opportunities to send together, so the messages are louder. That would be helpful. So,
Team Auckland.
Yeah, thank you very much. Were you happy to second, Councillor Lee?
Yes, happy. Yes, very much so.
Kia ora, thank you. Thank you very much to the both of you for attending today. All those in favour? Aye. Now, I